I stood in the church reception hall holding a casserole I'd made that morning. Warren's funeral had just ended, and people filled the room with quiet conversations and sad faces. I was 25, wearing a simple black dress I'd bought on sale 3 years ago. I'd spent the morning setting up tables and arranging food, while Paige sat in the front pew crying. Paige walked toward me with her husband Todd and several relatives. Her face had changed from grief to something colder, harder. She stopped right in front of me, close enough that people nearby could hear. "Venus, we need to be clear about something." My stomach tightened. I knew that tone. "You're not real family. Don't expect anything from Dad's estate. This business, this house, it's Caldwell legacy. You understand, right?" The words hit me like a slap. I looked past her to where my mother stood 10 feet away. She'd heard everything. Our eyes met for just a second before she looked down at the floor. She said nothing. She just stood there and let it happen. 15 years of invisibility crashed down on me in that moment. Every dismissal, every time I'd been overlooked, every sacrifice I'd made while Paige got everything, it all burned in my chest. I nodded slowly, set down the casserole, picked up my purse, and walked out. In my car, I opened the glove compartment. Inside was a manila folder marked property deed, Venus Whitmore. I pulled out my phone and made one call. "Mr. Garrison, it's time." I was 8 years old when everything changed the first time. I sat beside my father's hospital bed, holding his hand. He was dying of pancreatic cancer, and I could see how much it hurt him to even breathe.
But he still smiled at me.
"You're my brave girl," he whispered. His voice was so quiet I had to lean close. "I left you something special. Your mom has the paperwork. When you're older, you'll understand. I made sure you'd always be safe." I didn't understand what he meant. I was 8. I just wanted him to get better. He died 3 days later. At his funeral, my mother was completely broken. She couldn't stop crying. She barely spoke for weeks. I didn't know how to help her. I was just a kid trying to understand why my dad was gone. The next 2 years were hard. Mom worked 2 jobs, trying to keep our house. She was exhausted all the time and sad in a way that scared me. I learned to be quiet and take care of myself. I made my own lunches, did my homework alone, and stopped asking for things. I became invisible because my mother couldn't see anything through her grief. I didn't blame her then. I was just a little girl trying to survive. But those 2 years taught me how to disappear. When I was 10, Mom sat me down at our kitchen table with a smile that looked forced. "I have good news, sweetheart. I've met someone. His name is Warren. He's kind, successful, and he has a daughter about your age. We're going to be a family again." She seemed so happy. I wanted to be happy too. I met Warren Caldwell a week later. He was a big man with a loud voice and a firm handshake. When my mother introduced me, he barely glanced down. "Nice to meet you, Venus," he said, then immediately turned back to my mother. Then I met Paige. She was 12, pretty, with perfect blonde hair and cold blue eyes. She looked me up and down slowly. "You're so little. Are you sure you're 10? She smirked when she said it. It was the first cut. I didn't know there would be thousands more. 3 months later, they got married. Mom and I moved into the Caldwell house, a big suburban home with a perfect lawn and expensive furniture. My old bedroom set looked shabby and sad next to Paige's matching white furniture. "We're so lucky," Mom kept saying. "This is a fresh start." But I already felt like a guest, like I didn't belong. Paige made sure I knew it. By the time I was 11, I understood the rules of the Caldwell house. Paige was the princess. I was the extra. She got the bigger bedroom, the better clothes, first choice of everything. When I asked Mom why Paige got a new laptop while I had to share the old family computer, Mom's face went tight. "Warren provides for us now, Venus. We need to be grateful and not make waves." That became her constant refrain. Don't make waves. Be grateful. Be quiet. At Christmas, Paige opened gift after gift. Expensive clothes, electronics, jewelry. I got 3 small presents. Warren made a big show of explaining. "We spent a little more on Paige this year because she's been working so hard in school." I'd gotten straight A's all year. Paige had C's and B's.
Nobody mentioned that.
I smiled and said thank you like I was supposed to. I learned fast that my accomplishments didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. Paige's needs would always come first, and my job was to be grateful for whatever scraps I got. So, I became what they wanted.
Small.
Quiet. Grateful. I disappeared a little more every day. When I was 13, I graduated from middle school with an academic achievement award. I was so proud. I invited Mom and Warren to the ceremony. The morning of graduation, Warren announced at breakfast that he was taking Paige to tour a high school 2 hours away. It's the only day they're doing tours, he said. Mom hesitated. She looked at me, and for a second, I thought she might choose me. I should probably go with them to see the school. You understand, right, honey? I said what I always said. It's fine. I sat in the auditorium that afternoon surrounded by families. When they called my name, I walked up alone. I accepted my award with no one cheering. I smiled for the camera with no one there to see it. That night, I found a card on my bed. Sorry I missed it. So proud of you, Mom. I put it in my drawer and didn't cry. I'd already learned that my accomplishments didn't matter. Only Paige's did. This became the pattern. My awards, my games, my moments, they all happened alone. But Paige's events? The whole family showed up. I stopped inviting them. It hurt less that way. When I turned 16, Warren's catering company was growing. He needed help with weekend events. Venus, you'll work the events. It's a family business, so obviously we can't pay you, but you're contributing to our household. It wasn't a question. It was an assignment. For the next 4 years, I worked every weekend. I set up venues, served guests, managed vendors, and cleaned up afterward. I worked harder than any paid employee. I learned everything about the business: inventory, scheduling, client relations. Paige would show up occasionally for an hour, take selfies with the decorations, and leave. Paige has other commitments, Warren would say when I worked alone. Clients started asking for me specifically. That young woman Venus is so reliable, they'd tell Warren. Warren would smile and take credit. My daughter really helped with this, he'd say to people, gesturing vaguely toward Paige. I'd be standing right there. He never meant me. I stopped expecting recognition. I was just the unpaid labor, the invisible worker. I told myself it was fine. I was learning skills. But really, I was just being used. Everything changed when I was 17. I was cleaning out the garage when I found an old box labeled Venus from Dad. Inside were photos of my father and me, letters he'd written, and a sealed envelope marked important for Venus at age 18. My hands shook as I opened it. I knew I was a year early, but I couldn't wait. Inside was a letter in my father's handwriting and legal documents I didn't fully understand. My sweet Venus, the letter began. I invested carefully so you'd always have security. I bought a commercial property on Riverside and placed it in a trust for you.
It'll be yours at 25.
A lawyer named Garrison manages it. Don't tell anyone until you're ready. This is your safety net. I love you, Dad. I read about the property leased to a business. I didn't recognize the address at first. Then I Googled it. My heart stopped. It was the building where Warren's catering company operated. My father owned, no, I would own, the ground beneath the Caldwell family business. I sat on the garage floor, documents spread around me, and understood. My father had given me power. Real power. I hid everything and told no one. I just waited. I graduated high school at 18 with honors and a partial scholarship to community college. I'd have to work full-time to cover the rest of my expenses. Paige was heading to a private university 3 states away. Tuition was $40,000 a year. We're so proud of Paige for getting in. Warren announced at dinner, like she'd won a Nobel Prize. Mom nodded eagerly. Then she turned to me with a tight smile. Venus, you'll do great at community college. It's a smart, practical choice. I hadn't chosen it. It was all I could afford. Nobody offered to help. That fall, I worked full-time at a pharmacy and took classes at night. I studied in my car between shifts. I ate ramen and dollar menu food. Paige posted constant Instagram photos from her dorm, her sorority, her spring break trips to Cancun. Warren paid for everything. I never asked for help. I knew better. I worked myself to exhaustion while Paige partied through college on my stepfather's money. She failed half her classes and switched majors 3 times. I got straight A's while working 40 hours a week. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. But I remembered everything. Every double standard. Every dismissal. I was building a case in my mind, even if I didn't know it yet. When I was 22, Paige got engaged to Todd. He was a boring insurance broker with an okay job and no personality. Warren threw them an engagement party that cost more than my yearly tuition. The wedding planning started immediately. This is going to be the event of the year, Warren bragged to everyone. I was expected to help. I addressed 400 invitations by hand. I assembled favors for hours. I helped set up the venue. On the wedding day, I worked for free as part of the catering team. I wore a simple black uniform while Paige floated around in a $4,000 dress. The reception was lavish. 5-tier cake, open bar, live band. It cost more than I'd earn in 2 years. A distant aunt cornered me near the dessert table. When will it be your turn, Venus? I smiled my practice smile. I'm focused on finishing school right now. She nodded approvingly. So practical. Not like these girls who need fancy weddings. I watched Paige and Todd cut their expensive cake while guests cheered. I felt absolutely nothing. I'd learned to bury everything so deep that I couldn't feel it anymore. But I remembered. Every detail. Every cost. Every moment I was used. At 23, I'd been working in Warren's catering business for 7 years, unpaid at first, then part-time paid since I turned 21. I knew that business inside and out. I knew every vendor, every client preference, every operational detail. I'd essentially been running it while Paige collected credit. Warren announced he was creating a salaried management position. For one stupid moment, I let myself hope. Maybe he'd finally see me. Maybe this was it. Warren called a family meeting. I'm promoting Paige to operations manager. She'll oversee events and client relations. The salary is $60,000 a year. My hope died instantly. Paige had worked maybe 20 events in her entire life. She didn't know half the vendors' names. She couldn't manage a grocery list, let alone a business. I'd worked hundreds of events. I knew everything. Paige needs career stability now that she's married, Warren explained, like that made sense. Venus, you're still young. You'll have opportunities later. I nodded. Said congratulations. Smiled. That night, I pulled out the trust documents and checked the date. 18 months until my 25th birthday. 18 months until the property transferred to my name. I started counting down. At 24, I was 1 year away from everything changing. The property would officially become mine when I turned 25. I'd finished my associate degree and worked full-time as an office coordinator at a medical clinic. I still helped occasionally with Warren's business, always unpaid, always invisible. I started researching everything I could about property law, lease agreements, and tenant rights. I contacted Mr. Garrison, the trust attorney. When I take ownership, what are my options? I asked. He explained everything carefully. I could renew the lease, renegotiate terms, or decline to renew entirely. The current lease your father signed expires 1 month after your 25th birthday. Something shifted inside me when he said that. A feeling I'd never had before. Power. I wasn't powerless. I never had been. I'd just been waiting. I started documenting everything. My unpaid work. Paige's unearned salary. Every dismissive comment. Every time they treated me like I didn't matter. Not for revenge. Not yet. Just for proof. I wanted a record of exactly who they were and what they'd done. Because I had a feeling I'd need it. I turned 25 on a Tuesday morning. I woke up in my small apartment. I'd moved out at 24 and checked my phone. No messages. No card from Mom. No text from Paige. Warren was still alive then, but he'd never acknowledged my birthday anyway. I went to work, came home, ate dinner alone. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Sorry, it's been so busy. That was it. No call. No effort. Just a rushed text sent hours late.
I stared at it for a long time.
Then I deleted it without replying. The next morning, I received an email from Mr. Garrison. The property has officially transferred into your name. Congratulations, Venus. The deed is ready for pickup. I drove to his office during my lunch break. I signed the paperwork with shaking hands. Then he handed me the deed. I owned it. I owned the building. I owned the ground beneath the business that had used me for years. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a fake one. A real smile. I didn't tell anyone about the property transfer. I just went about my life like nothing had changed. I showed up to family dinners when invited. I played my role, quiet, helpful, invisible Venus. But now I was watching everything differently. I noticed how Warren talked constantly about expanding the business. How Paige bragged to everyone about signing new corporate clients. How Mom mentioned they were refinancing the house to invest more money in the company. They were building their entire future on land I owned. The lease expired in 4 months. Warren had no idea. I met privately with Mr. Garrison. What happens if I don't renew the lease? He explained that Warren would have to vacate the property or negotiate a new lease at current market rates. The market rate is approximately 4 times what he's currently paying. Can he afford that? I asked. Garrison pulled up financial records. He studied them carefully. Not likely. Not without massive restructuring or significant new capital. I nodded slowly. Let's wait and see what happens. I went home that night and made dinner. I watched TV. I went to bed. But everything had changed. I had power now. Real power. And I was just waiting for the right moment to use it. 3 months after my 25th birthday, Warren collapsed at a catering event. Massive stroke. They rushed him to the hospital. He died within 6 hours. The family fell apart. Paige sobbed uncontrollably. Mom went blank with shock, barely speaking. I felt complicated. I wasn't glad he was dead. I'm not a monster, but I wasn't devastated either. He'd never been my father. He'd barely acknowledged I existed for 15 years. I helped make arrangements. I called relatives. I organized the funeral service. Paige was too hysterical. Mom was too numb. I did what I always did. I quietly held everything together while they fell apart. At the funeral home, Paige clutched Todd and cried. What are we going to do without him? I stood nearby, unnoticed as always, and thought, you're about to find out. The lease expired in 30 days, and I wasn't renewing it. Warren's lawyer had scheduled a will reading for the following week. I knew Paige expected to inherit everything. I had my own meeting scheduled with Mr. Garrison the day after the funeral. The countdown had reached 0. Now we'd see what they were really made of. Warren's funeral was large. He'd been a respected businessman in town, and people came from everywhere. I sat in the second row. Not the first that was reserved for Paige, Todd, and Mom. The pastor talked about Warren's legacy, his generosity, his devotion to family. I stared at the coffin and felt nothing. Afterward, there was a reception at the house. I brought food. I set up tables. I served guests. Nobody thanked me. Nobody even noticed. Paige held court in the living room, accepting condolences and talking about Daddy's business, like she'd built it herself. Someone asked me how I was holding up. I'm okay. Just trying to support the family. They nodded sympathetically and moved on. I was still invisible, even at his funeral. But not for much longer. I'd already scheduled everything with Mr. Garrison. The lease termination notice was drafted and ready. It would be sent by certified mail the day after the will reading. I went into the kitchen to wash dishes, and that's when Paige found me. She had Todd with her.
And Mom.
The 3 of them standing there like a united front. I knew what was coming. I could feel it. The reception was winding down. Most guests had left. I was at the kitchen sink washing serving platters when Paige walked in with Todd, and my mother right behind her. Paige's face had changed. The grief was gone. Now she just looked cold and businesslike. Venus, we need to talk. I dried my hands on a towel and turned around. Okay. Paige crossed her arms. Now that Dad's gone, things are going to change. The business, the estate, it's all Caldwell legacy. You need to understand that you're not actually part of that. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face blank. What do you mean? She said it clearly, loud enough that anyone nearby could hear. You're not real family, Venus. You're Mom's daughter from before. Don't expect anything from Dad's estate. The business goes to me. This house goes to us. You understand, right? I looked past her to my mother. Mom stood there, hearing every word. Our eyes met. I waited for her to say something, to defend me, to tell Paige she was wrong. Mom looked away, looked down at the floor, said absolutely nothing. 15 years of being invisible crashed down on me in that moment. I set down the dish towel, picked up my purse, and walked out without saying a word. I sat in my car outside the house, shaking. Not from sadness, from pure fury. 15 years of being erased. And now this, dismissed publicly, with my own mother's silent permission. I pulled the deed from my glove compartment and stared at it. Property owner, Venus Whitmore. Then I called Mr. Garrison. It's Venus. I need you to send the lease termination notice tomorrow morning. Certified mail. He paused. Are you absolutely sure? Once we send it, there's no going back. Through the window, I could see into the house. Paige was laughing with some guests, playing the grieving daughter. I'm sure. 30 days notice as required by the lease. They need to vacate or negotiate new terms. And if they want to negotiate, my voice came out calm, cold. Market rate, $8,500 a month. Non-negotiable. Understood. I hung up and started my car. That night, I went home to my apartment. I made dinner. I took a shower. I went to bed. And I slept better than I had in months. The countdown had started. In 30 days, their world would collapse. And they had absolutely no idea what was coming. 4 days after the funeral, Paige was at the catering company office. She was sorting through Warren's files, probably already planning how to spend her inheritance. A courier arrived with a certified letter. She signed for it, distracted, and tore it open. I heard about this later from Mr. Garrison. He said her face went completely white. The letter was from Garrison and Holt Legal Trust Services. It was addressed to current tenant, Caldwell Catering Company. It formally notified them that the property lease would not be renewed. They had 26 days to vacate the premises or negotiate a new lease with the property owner. Paige read it 3 times, her hands shaking. This has to be a mistake. Dad owned this building. She called the number on the letterhead. Mr. Garrison answered. There must be some mistake, Paige said. My father owned this property. I'm afraid not, Garrison replied calmly. The property has been under trust ownership for 17 years. It recently transferred to the beneficiary. Who's the beneficiary? Paige demanded. That's confidential unless they choose to disclose it. Paige's voice got shrill. We're being evicted and you won't even tell us who owns the building? You're not being evicted. You're being notified that your lease won't be renewed. You're welcome to negotiate new terms with the owner. Paige hung up and immediately called Todd, panicking. We have a massive problem. Paige called an emergency family meeting. Just her, Todd, and my mother. At the house. I wasn't invited. I found out later what happened. Todd told me eventually, when everything fell apart. They sat around the dining room table with the notice, trying to make sense of it. Dad always said he owned the building. Paige insisted. Mom shook her head, confused. Maybe he leased it long-term? Maybe he just never mentioned it. Todd pulled out his phone and started Googling. He searched the trust company name, then the property records. His face went strange. The deed transferred 3 months ago, he said slowly.
He stopped.
Looked up. To Venus Whitmore. The room went completely silent. Paige laughed. It was sharp and bitter. That's impossible. Venus doesn't own anything. She's nobody. But Todd turned his phone around and showed her the public record. Property owner, Venus Whitmore. Mom's face crumbled. Her father. He must have left it to her. That's when it hit Paige. And she said nothing? She's been sitting on this for 3 months while we...
She stopped.
The realization spread across her face. She knew. She knew the whole time. And now she's kicking us out. Todd said quietly, "We need to call her." I was at work when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Paige for calls. Mom. 3 calls.
Todd, 2 calls.
I ignored every single one. At lunch, I listened to the voicemails. Paige's voice was shrill and furious. "You need to call me back right now. I know what you're doing, and it's disgusting. We just lost Dad, and you're pulling this." Mom's voice was shaky, pleading. "Venus, honey, please call me. We need to talk about this property situation. There's been some kind of misunderstanding." Todd's voice was measured, trying to sound diplomatic. "Hey Venus, it's Todd. We really need to discuss the Riverside property. I'm sure we can work something out that benefits everyone." I deleted all of them. That evening, I was home eating dinner when someone pounded on my apartment door. "I know you're in there. Open up."
Paige.
I stayed on my couch, eating my pasta, listening to her yell through the door. "You're a spoiled, selfish brat. After everything we've done for you, you owe us." I took another bite, chewed slowly. "This is sick, Venus. He just died, and you're doing this." I finished my dinner, washed my plate, watched TV. Eventually, she left. I went to bed in complete peace. I finally agreed to meet them, but only at Mr. Garrison's office. And only with him present. Paige, Todd, and my mother showed up dressed like they were going to court. Paige wore a suit. Mom looked pale and exhausted. They sat across the conference table from me. I was calm.
Composed.
Paige started immediately. "This is ridiculous. You can't just kick us out of Dad's business." I spoke quietly. "It's not his business location. It's mine." Mom tried next, her voice trembling. "Sweetheart, I know you're hurt about what Paige said at the funeral. She was grieving. She didn't mean it." I looked directly at my mother. "You said nothing. You stood there and said nothing while she erased me." Mom flinched like I'd hit her. Todd jumped in, trying to be reasonable. "Let's talk numbers. What would a lease renewal cost?" Mr. Garrison slid a paper across the table. "Market rate for a commercial property of that size is $8,500 per month. The previous lease was $2,000. Paige gasped. "That's insane. We can't afford that." I stood up and picked up my purse. "Then you have 22 days to vacate. This meeting is over." I walked out and didn't look back. Paige and Todd scrambled to find a new location for the business. But every comparable property was expensive, and they had no capital for a move. Warren's life insurance was tied up in probate. The business bank account was nearly empty. They'd spent everything on the funeral and hadn't paid several vendors. They tried to get a business loan. Denied. Their personal credit was maxed out from the wedding and a new car they'd bought last year. They tried to negotiate with me again. I didn't respond. With 1 week left on the lease, they had to tell the employees the business was closing. Clients started canceling contracts. Vendors called demanding payment for outstanding invoices. Paige had a complete breakdown in the empty office. Todd found her sobbing on the floor. "This was supposed to be mine," she cried. "He built this for me," Todd said grimly. "He built it on borrowed ground." Mom called me one last time. "Please, Venus, don't do this. You're destroying your sister's life." I replied calmly. "She's not my sister.
And I'm not real family.
Remember?" I hung up. 3 days before the eviction deadline, Caldwell Catering shut down permanently. Paige and Todd were financially ruined. 2 months later, the fallout was complete. Caldwell Catering was gone. Paige and Todd had to sell their house to pay off business debts. They were living in a cramped apartment across town. Paige's LinkedIn showed she was working retail at a department store. Todd was still job hunting. My mother called and asked to meet for coffee. I almost said no, but I agreed. We sat across from each other in a cafe. Mom looked 10 years older than she had at the funeral. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. Her voice was small. But I need you to know I see it now.
How we treated you.
How I let them treat you. She started crying. I was so desperate to keep Warren, to keep that life. I sacrificed you. And I'm so sorry.
I didn't cry.
I was past that. You had a choice every single time, I said. You chose them. Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. I did. And I lost the only person who ever truly loved me. I stood to leave. She grabbed my hand. What can I do?
Please.
Tell me what I can do. I pulled my hand away gently. Nothing. There's nothing left to do. I walked out of that cafe and never looked back. 3 months after the eviction, I leased the Riverside property to a nonprofit culinary training program for underserved youth. The rent was modest, partially subsidized by a grant I'd helped them apply for. They were doing real good in the community, teaching young people valuable skills. I attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. I watched teenagers and chefs, whites learning to cook, learning a trade that could change their lives. A local reporter interviewed me. Why did you choose this organization? I smiled. My father believed in giving people a foundation to build on.
I'm honoring that.
The story ran in the local paper with a photo of me in front of the building. Someone tagged Paige on Facebook. She saw the photo and wrote a bitter comment. Nice to see who she really is. Todd deleted it within minutes and told her to stop. It's over, Paige. Let it go. But she couldn't. She'd lost everything. And I had everything. The golden child had fallen. And the invisible daughter was finally seen. I never responded to her comment. I didn't need to. I'd already moved on to a life they couldn't touch. A year later, I stood in the kitchen of my own small house. I'd bought it with income from the property lease and my salary from my new job as a program coordinator at the nonprofit. I was 27 now, celebrating my birthday with real friends. People who saw me, valued me, chose me. Chosen family. After everyone left, I sat on my porch alone. I held a photo of my father, taken when I was 6. We were both smiling. You knew, I whispered. You knew I'd need this. He'd given me more than property. He'd given me proof of my worth, my power, my right to take up space in the world. I didn't destroy Paige out of cruelty. I simply stopped protecting people who never protected me. I enforced my boundaries. I claimed what was legally mine. I let them face the consequences of their own actions. The revenge was never mine to plan. It was my father's final gift, and my choice to accept it. I thought about Paige sometimes. Working retail, living small, finally understanding what it felt like to be invisible. I didn't gloat. I didn't call her. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I wasn't invisible now. I was free, and that was the only victory that ever mattered.